That may not be funny on paper, but if you use your imagination, it will get funnier the more you think about it. Believe me. By the way, the onlooker was a qualified vehicle mechanic, and the busy guy used to be a nurse. Who knows what sent these guys into the land of Nod? A hobo explained to his hobo friend that he had success in getting a meal when he knocked on doors holding a piece of tree bark and asking for some butter. His friend tried it and got the response, "If you that friggin' hungry, you'll eat it without butter." One last tale. We were awakened in the early hours one morning, and climbing down the ladder in my underpants, I spotted a guy tin bashing and arc welding. I got out the hose pipe and started to spray him with water. He looked up thinking it was raining and then realized what was going on. He switched off his welder and screamed at me, "I could have been electrocuted." I replied with my usual answer when I do something silly. "You're doing what you want to do and I'm doing what I want to do. That's our God-given right." He was smaller than me, so I felt reasonably confident. He was still sat there at 6 a.m. next morning trying to figure it all out. 2 days later, he was found, arrested for some crime or other earlier in his life and jailed for 6 months, so we never saw him again. After loads of hilarious and food-for-thought episodes, our home was now ready to be put into the water. I called the mover, and we transported our pride and joy to its pre-arranged and paid-for slip in Marina del Rey. We moved at midnight, at the suggestion of the mover, because we could probably get away without paying for a special license. After saying goodbye to our friends, I know they were outcasts of society, but not to us that understood. We loaded up and drove to our posh destination. We arrived with no intervention from the highway patrol, unloaded and slept on board until the next morning, on the car park of the company that was scheduled to launch our, hopefully, floating home. The operator of the huge crane checked that all the seacocks were closed, etc., and I quickly gave our new home another coat of anti-fouling paint, whilst she was still suspended 2 feet above dry land. He then carefully lowered her into the water. It seemed like a lifetime until she stopped going down and settled exactly on the waterline that had been a nightmare for me to scribe round the hull. Everything checked out okay. She wasn't taking on water, etc., so we could now head to our permanent slip. We felt so proud as we motored. We had no mast yet, across the main waterway to the channel where our slip was located. Our joy came to an abrupt halt when we approached our destination. I put her into reverse to slow down for the turn into our slip, and the damned prop shaft came away from the engine so we couldn't stop, and kept going. We were rapidly approaching the seawall, and I was screaming for someone to throw us a line, which they did, but not before the bow hit, albeit gently, the iron fence at the end of the channel. Like our joy, the boat came to a halt. I did a quick fix on the prop shaft and maneuvered the boat into the right direction. To the applause of the amused onlookers, we docked her safely and attached the mooring lines. Introductions and lots of drinks followed, and yours truly and his lovely and patient wife then settled to a good night's sleep, aided by the gentle roll of our self-made 35-feet cradle. The following morning was like waking up in a holiday resort. The sun was shining on the pristine boats moored around us, and people were busy throning and polishing their expensive toys. Not all the boat owners lived on board. Many of them were city dwellers and came only on weekends and holidays. It was nice to see that an Englishman had the slip directly opposite us and lived on his 32-feet motorboat named Bratusa for obvious reasons. He turned out to be a great neighbor, as did all the other fellow boaters. We took time out and strolled around the whole marina area agog with the number and size of the vessels. There are an estimated 7,000 boats in this rather expensive paradise, and many of them owned by well-known celebrities. Do you remember the tragedy of Natalie Wood, devoted wife of Robert Wagner, who fell off the boat Splendor and who sadly drowned? Their boat was still moored there. The late and great Bing Crosby's ex-boat and the lovely Julie Andrews' massive vessel are just 2 more examples. Our slip came complete with the use of a swimming pool and an exercise room with showers, etc. The complex housing these was surrounded by palm trees and located a few steps away at the end of our dock. You can probably imagine how thrilled we were to live there after being brought up in Lancashire cotton towns. Not that our hometowns didn't have their good points. After we had settled in and met a few more people, we tackled the task of finishing our sailboat, which our new family of friends had nicknamed the Mastless One. That was our first job. Locate a suitable used mast and complete the rigging. We could then call it by the name we had painted on the stern, EB Gum. There was a very well-established marine store, about an hour's drive down PCH, Pacific Coast Highway, in Newport Beach. I picked up pretty well all the stuff I needed to keep me busy for another few months. Mast, etc., compass, and many more not cheap, but necessary items. The transmission shop kept me busy as well over the next couple of years, but I would prefer not to talk about it again, please understand. The Dodge Caravan that had served us well now had to have a smog test, and it certainly would not meet the very strict California standards. I had to find a used car salesman that wouldn't notice it was a Canadian car. I eventually found the novice I was looking for and did a straight swap for a Californian estate car. It was a Chevy Celebrity in pristine condition. If you are that salesman, all's fair in love and war. And buying a car. I told another lie. I did have a problem with the Dodge. Shame on me. The front brakes needed some minor work, which I had done at a local garage. On my way home on the Long Beach Freeway, I braked to take my turnoff, and lo and behold, I had no brakes at all. It was real scary as I dropped through the gears and came to a point where I could exit the freeway and stop. The garage towed the vehicle back to their shop and fixed the problem. They explained that over the years, the salt from the roads in Canada had corroded the brake mechanism, and this was an unknown factor in California. They assured me that all would be well now, and it was. The doctors tell us not to use too much salt. I guess mechanics will now tell us the same. Slowly but surely, I got the boat to a point where the mast could be stepped, or fitted, with all the associated lines, halyards, and electrics. I had to take our boat to the marina that launched her, and a friend offered to assist me. We had no problems until the idiot at the other marina directed us to a slip closest to the crane to be used for the mast job. It was right at the side of a big brick wall. No, I didn't hit it. But while I was steering into this very tight corner, my friend was stood at the bow waiting to throw the mooring line, and for some reason that still remains a mystery, he fell in the water. I've never moved, or had to think, so fast in all my life. What's the phrase? Something about shitting bricks, and there I was, heading for thousands of them. Anyhow, I managed to coast her in like a veteran and throw the line to the amused geezer on the dock. The mast was stepped, and I sailed back home with no difficulty, to the amazement of our friends patiently waiting for me. I even managed a perfect entry into our slip. The next major job was to finish off the keel by adding the final layer of concrete. This time I used the lead shot that I had saved for this purpose. The job went like clockwork, and I ended up with a perfectly balanced boat and a neat-looking and practical bilge, into which I fitted a very modern high-tech pump. We could take on water any time now. I felt very confident. Having made good progress on the boat building, I should tell you what Rita was up to. I had telephoned the British consulate on Wilshire Boulevard in L.A. on some matter and happened to ask if they ever hired English people locally. They confirmed that they did indeed, and in fact had a current vacancy. Rita got a job in the passport department. This was good news, as up until then, neither of us could legally work, and this job entitled Rita to a visa enabling her and her spouse to legally work in America. We also obtained Social Security cards that are necessary in the States for identification and any future benefits that may be available. Marty rang one day in November. Yes, we had a telephone on the boat. Aren't we posh? We chatted away, and I told him that it was a shame he didn't live in L.A., as I had just the girl for him. With all his money, good looks, and charm, he still couldn't find a girl. Joking, pal. My good friend asked me to describe her, and I obliged. When I eventually hung up, Rita asked me who I was talking about, and I mentioned Ava, the sweet little English girl whom Rita had befriended at the consulate. The next question was, how can you say they would make a good match? I explained my thinking. Marty was a gentleman with a sense of humor, and Ava was a gentlelady with a sense of humor, so they had to be good together. Rita gave me a doubting look. Shortly after, Marty rang again to tell me he was coming to L.A. on business the next week. Coincidence? Could I arrange for the four of us, including Ava, to go for a meal, etc.? I don't know what the etc. meant, but I went along and arranged it. I gave Ava some cock and bull story, and we all ended up the week after, sitting in some posh restaurant, having a super time. The conversation wasn't strained at all, and everyone got along just fine. The two girls walked ahead of us when we left, and Marty tapped me on the shoulder and told me he hated me. I was shocked. This must be a joke. With a puzzled look, I asked him why. He sheepishly and all goo-goo-eyed replied, I've waited all my life for a girl like Ava, and she lives 3,000 miles from me. What a relief. This was better than I'd expected. Marty was crazy about her, but he hadn't actually made too much progress in the what the hell do I do next area. The day after he got back to Toronto, he rang me yet again, asking if I could give him Ava's telephone number. I explained that I'd had no feedback from Ava and didn't feel comfortable giving out her number without knowing if she wanted to hear from him again. Marty was gung-ho, but I should speak to Ava quickly or Marty would just die. I did, and we had a long philosophical chat about life. She really did like Marty, but her experience told her to be cautious. Basically, I told her that he would never hurt her in any way. It was his breeding to treat her like a lady, and in my opinion, she had nothing to lose by talking to him. I think she was secretly excited, but simply said, "Give Marty my number and see if he calls me." See if he calls me. Marty told me later never to let his dad know, but his telephone bill for the next month was over $1,000. Ava rang me after about a month and told me that Marty wanted her to visit him in Toronto at his expense. This was fast and made Ava's head spin a little. I suggested she go for a free holiday and test the water. He would look after her, and whatever the outcome, he would send her home in good order. She went. He impressed her. She returned a hand in her notice at work and was living with Marty in Toronto 1 month later. Now isn't that a nice love story? But that's not the end. They got married the following New Year's Eve, and we were privileged to be the only ones to be told beforehand other than the registrar. Our two lovebirds are still happy together and traveling the world. We see each as often as possible. Keep happy, guys. Everything else was falling into place now, and we could even confidently sail around the marina. Let me be a little bit more boastful. We'd buy a bottle of champagne and some orange juice and sail around like millionaires, royally waving at other proud boaters. Word of our good life must have spread like wildfire as we were inundated with visitors over the next year or so, which was great as it gave us an opportunity to show off. Bill and Judy from Dunchurch canceled their trip to Florida that year in favor of a trip to see us. We were honored and gladly put them up on the boat for 10 days. It was great to see a young, beautiful girl like Judy from a little village in the backwoods of Canada shopping in a big city like Los Angeles. She shopped till her husband dropped. I'm sure they enjoyed their stay as much as we did having them as they sent us the following poem. Maybe not up to your literary standards, but we sure appreciated it. Memories. Rita and Al, no words can express the way the two of us feel. The City of Angels is where you belong. You are guilty without an appeal. You took us aboard, gave what you had, and did what we asked on request. In the city of stars and beauty and grace, there's no doubt we were blessed with the best. Thousands of miles, mountains, big rivers, and a desert or two. Millions of people and hours of time can't keep us away from the two of you. The warmth of your hearts and the glow of your smiles are felt and seen every day. There is no doubt that some of the best were spent in Marina del Rey. Remember us often as we think of you, when every evening descends. If ever you need us, remember, please call Bill and Judy, your Canadian friends. Bill and Judy will always remain close to our hearts, and we pray that they will continue to live a happy and contented life together. Frosty and his wife called one day and asked if they could visit for a couple of days. They had traveled down from New York in their pink Cadillac to spend a few weeks with their son in Tucson. We were only a 12-hour drive away, so they would pop over. The distances are mind-boggling. They arrived the next day, and off we were once again to see the familiar sights. Rita and I are no different than most people, so we had to see Beverly Hills and Bel Air. As expected, the mansions were enormous and magnificent with matching gardens. Driving down one street, we noticed a youngish girl sitting on a low garden wall at the front of one of the ritzy houses. We were bound and determined to meet somebody famous, so we approached. Like me, she was a nobody, but after chatting a while, it came out that she was born and bred in Bolton, my hometown. Uncanny, isn't it? She explained that she and her friends met there weekly for a game of tennis on the court at the rear of this house. It was the home of the fabulous Rosemary Clooney. She pointed out a couple of houses across the street and told me that one of the late Gershwin brothers used to live in one, and I forget who the other belonged to. We had partially satisfied our silly desire, so off we drove, without a dinner invitation. In late June of 1990, my brother and his wife with their two teenagers, Paul and Lisa, came from England for a 3-week holiday. We had arranged to sleep on a friend's boat, and my family would sleep on ours. When Lisa first saw her bunk, her facial expression confirmed what we had dreaded. The way I'd designed this particular bed made most use of the available space, but it ended up looking very much like a coffin. I told Lisa to cross her arms over her chest and she would sleep well. The first morning she awoke, with relief I think, she was startled by the fact that she was bathed in sunshine. I explained we had no reason to close the hatch, and it was nice to sleep under the stars. After visiting the local tourist spots, including Disneyland and Universal Studios, we hired a 7-seater van and went touring. The coastal route north towards San Francisco is breathtaking, and the Monterey Peninsula even more so. My dream, Lady Doris Day, now lives in that area around Carmel. Boy, what would I give to meet her? But it wasn't to be. A scenic route, officially called 17-Mile Drive, is an absolute must if you ever get over there. This is the home of the legendary Pebble Beach Golf Course. Being a golfer, Ian was in his element, but at those prices, a game was out of the question. I discreetly bought a postcard, wrote a cryptic comment about improving his golf game, and signed it Arnold. I mailed it to Ian's address in the UK, and they all had a good laugh when they got home. We left this paradise to enjoy all the many attractions of San Francisco. There's nowhere on earth like this place for proving that no matter what your birthplace is or what lifestyle you choose, you can live here unhindered by people's traditional hang-ups found elsewhere. After calling in at the beautiful Yosemite National Park, we arrived in Las Vegas. Our visitors couldn't believe the temperature when we stepped out of the car. 110 degrees was a bit too much. We booked in at the Sahara Hotel and Casino and rushed to our favorite hotspots to take advantage of as many free perks as we could. I was busy on the slots most of the time trying to pay for the trip. I got mad as the family dragged me away just before midnight, saying they were all tired and wanted to go to bed. Bed so early in this place. I had no choice, so off we trotted to the room. We chatted a while, and then someone knocked on the door. I was flabbergasted when a waiter walked in with a cake and a bottle of champagne. I'd forgotten it was now July the 8th, my 50th birthday. What a wonderful surprise, and to spend such a red-letter birthday in my favorite city with my brother made me so happy. Thanks, everybody. It was so thoughtful of you. Our family must have enjoyed their visit as much as we enjoyed having them. They still talk about it to this day. Kate, Rita's sister, and her husband Bill came shortly after with their son Michael. They lived in New Zealand and were on their way home after a holiday in Europe and arranged a 1-week stop over at our place. They were relative strangers, and we weren't sure whether they would be comfortable sleeping on a boat, so I arranged for them to stay in a friend's apartment close by. Like all our other visitors, they were dying to see the usual sights and theme parks, so we retraced our recent tours, the ever-pleasant staff in Disneyland, etc. Were now waving at us and saying, "Hi, back again." Kate and family enjoyed it all immensely, and after relaxing back at the marina for a couple of days, returned to their faraway island home. The Lord said to Noah, "I would like you to build another ark, but this time make it 3-story and fill it with fish, specifically carp." Noah replied, "No problem, but let me summarize your request. You want me to build you a 3-story carp ark?" Our boat-building days were spiced up by the often-chance meeting of somebody famous. We met and chatted with many celebrities, but I've had strict instructions not to name-drop quite as much. But Neil Diamond, Ted Danson, David Burney, to name but a few. Except we became good friends of Jonathan G., who has played a heavy in loads of movies. He got me involved in a money-making scheme that sounded great. Lots of stars were active in this revolutionary idea. They had money to lose, but we didn't. So I played their game cautiously. Good job, too. I was lucky and only lost about $1,000. I don't know how I do it, but it had a good side as we met a host of super people and went to a lot of lavish parties. That reminds me, a perk of Rita's job was invitations to garden parties at the British consulate and free entry to see the cast and crew screenings of British films at various cinemas. Many movie stars or other celebrities were at these exciting events. Once again, I am being tempted to name drop. Oh, to hell with it. We met Roddy McDowell one time and also spent about half an hour talking to a real-life gentleman by the name of Carl Malden and his lovely wife. This couple was so friendly and natural. I often wonder if Loretta Swit tells her friends she saw Rita and me at that party. I need to have a good laugh, no matter where I am. So, when a posh-looking dame in a Rodeo Drive dress, drinking a snobby drink in a triangular-shaped glass, approached me, I decided that this was my moment. She came up to me and introduced herself and said, "Hi there, my name is so-and-so from the Los Angeles Philharmonic Orchestra. Who may you be?" I couldn't resist and replied, "Hi there, I'm Alan Hodgkiss and I'm unemployed," and took a drag on my cigar. She went white and sloped off. I thought Rita was going to kill me. Well, so what? The woman was only brown-nosing with somebody she thought might have done her some good, as I did have on a very expensive suit, so she deserved my remark. Not long now and I'll shut up, but I am on a roll with the forbidden topic. We had the good fortune to be invited to a stage play starring Stephanie Beacham, and on the way in, we met and talked to Eric Estrada, one of the stars of Chips. Anyway, the play was super, and the party afterwards was even better. One table was like a mirage to star-crazy people like us. Seated at one huge round table were several of the, dare I say, older stars, including Esther Williams, with whom I had to speak being a swimmer, and also the distinguished-looking Cesar Romero. A very memorable show was Lethal Weapon 2. Mel was not there, but we managed to meet and speak with Danny Glover. We got his autograph in case he ever became famous. By now, you will be either drooling with envy or bored to death. But if you were writing this book, I bet you'd squeeze in a few names. Even with all the heartbreak, we wouldn't have missed this exciting experience for the world. The memories will remain with us forever. Now, don't get whiplash, but the money was rapidly running out, for reasons that I won't go into. And when it was obvious that the situation wouldn't improve, we had to act fast. Rita flew back to Ottawa and I stayed behind to sell the boat that was by now fully seaworthy and an absolute dream. It was heartbreaking, but it had to go. I gave an interested doctor an offer he couldn't refuse, and he bought it without hesitation. An hour after the sale had been completed, I was in my trusty car all geared up for another long drive across the States. Back to Canada, 1991 to 96. It was now April 1991. I had a journey of close to 3,000 miles ahead of me. How could I pass the time? I decided to make it a cannonball run. It was exactly 1:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, when I set off, and I optimistically allowed myself 48 hours to reach Windsor, Ontario. I drove within the speed limit, but continuous. I stopped only for the obvious, and once for a shower and a quick nap in a motel just outside Amarillo, Texas. Whilst I was there, I telephoned Marty to let him know that I would be calling in on him in a few days. Even the cities I'd never been to before, like Oklahoma City and St. Louis, didn't slow me down. The only real thrill to speak of, apart from the driving, was crossing over the Rio Grande River. I still didn't stop, but I yelled, "Yippee-I-O!" as I sped across this famous waterway. I could tell you about all the friggin' truck drivers who wouldn't get out of my way in the pissing rain in St. Louis, but I'm in a hurry. The officer at the Canadian border crossing approached my window at exactly 4:35 p.m., 48 hours and 5 minutes after leaving Marina del Rey. I did it. I passed through customs and immigration into Canada with no problems and made my way to a telephone booth. I phoned Marty, but he wouldn't believe where I was and invited me to a party he was giving at his house in Toronto. I explained that I'd just driven for 48 hours straight and just wanted to get to bed. He said, "Yeah, right. If that's the case, you can drive another 3.5 hours to Toronto with no trouble." As a final rub, I put my foot down and reached his house 3 hours later. You could have knocked him over with a feather. Needless to say, my speedy trip was the talk of the party from then on. Rita and I met up in Ottawa the following day. Needless to say, we had lots to talk about, so we brought each other up to date with all that had happened. She had secured a job at Sears. This was only temporary until a position became available at the British High Commission. This soon came, and she started there in the passport department. I had no luck at all in Ottawa, so I drove down to Toronto to try my luck there. Didn't have any. The situation was getting quite embarrassing, actually. I had never been unemployed and had difficulty in accepting it. Fortunately, Marty and Ava were living in Toronto at that time, and they very kindly provided accommodation, etc., until matters improved. I'll be forever grateful to my friends for keeping me alive. Whilst in Toronto, I had a surprise visit from our friend Paul Muggleston from Marina del Rey. He was supposed to be on a business trip to Vancouver, but he goofed and ended up in Toronto. I'm glad he did. It was great to see him, if only for one night. I knew he would appreciate seeing the local beauty spot, so I took him to a strip club. I think we spilled more drinks than we drank, but it was a good night. Of course, Paul had to have his photograph taken with one of the naked girls. He was sad to leave. I think he could have happily retired there. It would be a few years before we would meet again. A short while later, I went into partnership with a super guy from Ghana. Francis was a time-served tradesman who now concentrated on making leather clothes. I financed the operation from most of the cash, from the boat sale, and also from the maturing mortgage. I had held on the marina for the past 3 years. We leased a workshop with a nice modern showroom and worked our fingers to the bone for 3 months. When we had about 200 leather jackets ready for sale, we planned our opening day. It never came. The day before the business insurance became effective, delayed by an incompetent salesperson. Our premises were broken into, and everything we owned was stolen. The bastards took all the jackets we had sweated blood to make, and just about everything else. History had repeated itself, and I was broke again. Still angry and trying to figure out what I had done to deserve these major setbacks, I drove back to Ottawa. At least I would have Rita to console me. I must mention this very sad event. A female sales representative had called on us regularly at the leather place, and we used to commiserate with each other, as we were both separated from our spouses, both for different reasons, but nevertheless living alone. This led to her inviting me to her apartment one evening for dinner. Rita knows this story. Anyhow, I canceled this date as I decided to drive up to Ottawa to see Rita. On the way up, listening to the radio, I heard the back end of a tragic story about a girl called Susan. Was this the sales rep? I waited patiently for the next newscast, and sadly, this confirmed that it was indeed the very same Susan. She had been shot dead. On the very day I should have gone to her apartment, her estranged husband had visited and an argument followed. He shot Susan and then himself. I couldn't believe it. There, but for the grace of God, I would surely have been another victim if I had kept that date. Poor girl. I cried a little and then wondered if I could have done anything if I had been there. I concluded that I would have had no chance against a maniac armed with a shotgun. Rest in peace, Sue. Rita was understanding about my job, or lack of one, bless her, and I kept searching. I eventually secured a position with an old-school Thai type of chappie who was setting up a merchant bank. I did okay during the next 12 months, not by accident or generosity, but by bloody hard work. We had reached a profit-sharing agreement, and it went well. Rita and I even saved up enough money to buy a house in Aylmer, Quebec, where prices are cheaper. That sounds a long way away, but where we bought was only a 15-minute drive to Parliament Hill in Ottawa, and Rita worked in this area. It was a rather large 3-bedroom detached bungalow with spacious gardens all round. Anyway, it was nice, and we were very happy there with good neighbors to boot. 2 of our closest friends were Bob and Sue with their children Mandy and Nicholas. Sue was a very pretty woman and really good with children. So much so that several couples entrusted their kids to her care while they went to work to pay for it. Bob was a fireman, and probably the strongest man I'd ever met. Only strangers shook his hand. It was too painful. He didn't mean to hurt. He was really a gentle giant. During a firefighting course, the instructor asked one of the students, "If you arrive at a house that has smoke-blackened windows, but no flames are visible, what does that tell you?" The student replied with a confident smile, "We are at the right address." One day, a bunch of friends were having a barbecue at Bob and Sue's house. Bob had gone over to our house just across the street to pick up something, taking with him the 3-year son of one of the friends. Now, Bob is very responsible, but kids will be kids, and when Bob turned his back for 1 minute, the boy ran across the busy street. I screamed to Bob, who, being a fireman, reacted in a split second. He shot into the road, grabbed the lad by the scruff of the neck, and literally threw him onto the sidewalk, safe from the rapidly approaching car.